I pushed open the front door with grocery bags cutting into my hands, but before I even reached the kitchen, I heard the shouting, sharp, irritated voices, the kind that scraped the air. I slowed, heart thudding, and stepped into the doorway, only to freeze. They were all there: Mark, Karen, my uncle. The entire family circled around Aunty like she was some problem they needed to solve, their faces twisted with impatience, their voices dripping with contempt. Mark slammed a folder onto the table so hard it rattled the glasses. "This is what happens when dead weight tries to handle real work," he snapped. "She can't even keep up with basic paperwork anymore." Aunty flinched. Actually flinched. Her hands trembled as she wiped them on her apron, her shoulders curling inward like she wanted to vanish. Karen's voice sliced through the room. "She's a burden now, emotionally, financially, in every way." She didn't care that I was standing right there. In fact, she said it louder. I stepped forward instinctively. "Enough! She's doing her—" Karen spun on me. "You need to stop enabling her uselessness." Aunty whispered, "I'm sorry, I'll do better." Even though she was the only innocent one in the room, she apologized to the very people crushing her spirit. Then came the demand. "Sign over your remaining shares," Mark said coldly. "You're slowing everything down." "And maybe find somewhere else to stay," Karen added. "This house isn't a charity." "She's still living here without contributing anything worthwhile," Mark mocked. Aunty gave me this tiny, broken smile, the kind people make when they're used to swallowing humiliation so deep it becomes part of them. My throat tightened. "Stop. Just stop." But the words barely left my mouth before they laughed. Actually laughed. Karen shook her head. "She should be grateful we even let her stay here." Heat crawled up my neck. Aunty stumbled backward, brushing against a chair as if her body had suddenly aged under the weight of their words. She turned and shuffled toward the back door. I followed her out to the porch. She stood there gripping the railing, knuckles white, breath uneven. "It's all right," she whispered. "They're family." Something inside me twisted so sharply it felt like it cut clean through me. A promise formed, quiet, coiled, and burning. The air around us felt thick, heavy with humiliation that clung like smoke. She stared into the yard like it was the only place she could still breathe. When I drove home, her defeated expression stayed with me. Branded, unshakable. This wasn't the end. It was the spark. "They'll regret calling you a burden," I whispered into the empty car, my jaw locked, my hands trembling on the wheel. And I meant every word. I keep thinking back to how all of this really began, not with the shouting I heard yesterday, but years before that. Back when Aunty practically raised me while juggling the chaos of the early business. I remember waking up as a kid to the soft tapping of her calculator at dawn, the kitchen light glowing behind her as she handled bookkeeping before anyone else was even awake. By noon, she was cooking for the entire family, moving through the house with quiet purpose, and by afternoon, she was out front greeting customers with that warm, steady smile everyone trusted. She was the backbone, even if no one ever said it aloud. The business survived those early, impossible years because she held everything together. When things finally took off, when the money started flowing and recognition became a currency of its own, she stepped back. Not because she wanted to, but because she believed in letting her brothers and their spouses shine. "Family first," she always said, even as she accepted a smaller share of the profits. Late at night, when the house was silent, she'd sit with me at the dining table and talk about her dream of expanding the business nationwide. She'd sketch ideas on scrap paper, eyes bright with possibility. But when the family started arguing about direction and leadership, she folded those dreams away and chose peace instead. Then came the year her husband died. Sudden, devastating. She could have stepped back completely, but instead, she poured all her grief into saving the business during its hardest season. She was everywhere at once, training new staff, calming customers, smoothing over tempers, quietly fixing mistakes before anyone noticed. She became the unofficial mother of the workplace. But once the profits soared again, once things were comfortable, she started fading from their conversations. Not by choice, by dismissal. Karen began twisting every tiny mistake into evidence that Aunty wasn't keeping up anymore. A misplaced invoice, a delayed email, things she would have forgiven instantly in anyone else. I still remember the afternoon Aunty handed over some of her responsibilities. Just to reduce stress, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked heartbroken, but she masked it with grace. She always did. Harmony matters more than recognition, she told me later. I could tell she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Slowly, she stopped sharing ideas altogether. Whenever she spoke up, she was brushed aside, labeled as too emotional, too soft, too old-fashioned. Years of that kind of dismissal don't just hurt, they reshape a person. I watched her shrink a little more each time, reorganizing herself to avoid conflict. The worst moment, the one I can never forget, was the day Mark joked about her age in front of the staff. She laughed along, but that night I found her sitting alone, tears slipping down her face silently. Not the kind of tears that ask for comfort, but the kind that accept defeat. But she kept pretending things were fine. She didn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable, not even the people cutting her deepest. Her real wound wasn't losing influence in the business. It was the betrayal, the realization that the same people she had sacrificed decades for now saw her as disposable. And yesterday, when they humiliated her in front of me, it wasn't just another insult. It was the final fracture in a heart already scarred by years of quiet hurt. I see it clearly now. I ignored her slow erasure for too long. I won't ignore it anymore. The shift happened faster than I expected. The very next week, they moved around Aunty like her humiliation had unlocked some new permission, like degrading her once meant they could do it again without consequence. I watched Karen complain loudly about extra expenses Aunty created, as if she weren't part of the household but some unwanted guest draining resources. Then Mark changed the office locks. No warning, no explanation. When Aunty asked why her key suddenly didn't work, he shrugged and said, "It's for safety." Safety from what? A woman who built the place with her bare hands? Aunty tried to laugh it off. I tried to spin it into something harmless, but I saw her fingers tremble as she tucked the useless key into her purse. When she requested the financial statements she used to manage every quarter, they told her she wouldn't understand them anymore. The words landed with a cold finality that made her step back like she'd been slapped. I confronted Mark later in the hallway. "You know what you're doing is cruel," I told him. He rolled his eyes. "You're being dramatic. She's slipping. We're just adjusting." Adjusting. That's what they called stripping her of everything she'd poured her life into. The next blow came when Karen cornered Aunty in the living room, voice low and sharp, demanding she sign away her remaining shares. I heard the desperation disguised as politeness. Auntie's expression crumpled for a moment before she forced a smile and said she'd think about it for peace. My chest tightened. "Why do you keep letting them treat you like this?" I asked her later when we were alone. She shrugged softly, eyes fixed on her hands. "It's easier this way." But that night, when she thought no one was watching, something in her gaze looked hollow, like she was fading out piece by piece. She felt unwell during a family dinner the next evening and didn't come downstairs. Nobody noticed. Nobody asked. The next day, at the business meeting, they openly scolded her for not keeping up. The conference room felt heavy with awkward silence. I stood up for her again, only to be accused of meddling, of stirring trouble. The staff shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but none of them dared to speak. Fear kept them quiet. Later, Aunty pulled me aside. Her voice was small. "I don't think I belong there anymore." "You deserve better," I told her, feeling anger burn through me. But she only gave me that sad, practiced smile, the one she'd worn so long it looked like part of her. Then came the ultimatum. They demanded she hand over her ownership within the week. No discussion, no kindness, just pressure, force, erasure. That night, she finally broke down in front of me. The tears came silently at first, then all at once, as if years of swallowed pain had cracked open. And something in me snapped. "You don't have to stay in that toxic house," I told her. My voice shook, not with fear, but with certainty. "You don't owe them your life." She looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Resolve. Quiet, dangerous, alive. "Maybe you're right," she whispered. And that's when everything began to shift. Auntie called me over just after sunset, her voice steady in a way that felt unusual. When I arrived, she was sitting at the dining table with an old wooden box in front of her, the kind that creaked when she touched it. She slid it toward me without a word. Inside were papers yellowed at the edges, early contracts, handwritten ledgers, emails printed from ancient accounts. I didn't understand what I was looking at until I saw the signatures. Her signatures? I flipped through page after page, my heart beginning to pound. These weren't small contributions. These were the investments that kept the company alive in its first 5 years. Her savings, her inheritance, her sacrifices, all quietly poured into a business the family now swore she had nothing to do with. A chill swept through me. "Auntie, this is the foundation of everything," I whispered. She nodded, eyes lowered, as if ashamed of her own generosity. "I never wanted them to feel obligated. I thought, if I stayed quiet, we'd stay a family." But silence had only dug her grave deeper. The more we searched, the more truth surfaced. Old shareholder agreements revealed something shocking. She still held more control than they believed. They had built this whole narrative of her being irrelevant, powerless, when legally she held the upper hand the entire time. Auntie exhaled, long and tired. "I'm done being silent." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. It was Daniel, one of her former trainees. His voice came warm and confident through the speaker. His independent branch was thriving, and he wanted her to know his door was open if she ever needed a place to start fresh. I watched Auntie's posture change. Her shoulders lifted, her eyes sharpened. Someone finally saw her worth, and that single reminder cracked open all the strength she'd buried. "I want out," she said softly, "but I want to leave on my terms, not theirs." We met with a lawyer the next morning, a meticulous man who spent an hour reviewing her documents before leaning back in his chair with an expression I can only describe as disbelief. "They needed you," he said. "You never needed them." Those words lit something explosive in the room. Auntie began packing that night. No drama, no announcements. She folded clothes like she was folding away old versions of herself. Every drawer she emptied seemed to release a decade of hurt. She didn't tell the family a single thing. No. I helped her move into a small apartment across town. Sunny windows, clean walls, a place that felt untouched by pain. She walked through the rooms with a quiet awe, as if realizing freedom had a sound. Then came the final step. She signed paperwork reclaiming her shares, her rights, and the assets legally tied to her contributions. With those, she initiated the setup for her own independent branch, one she would run without their shadows choking her. The shift didn't happen with shouting or confrontation. It happened in silence, cold, precise, powerful. The woman they dismissed as a burden was about to walk away with the very business they built on her back. And they had no idea what was coming. Auntie woke before dawn on moving day, the house still quiet, the sky barely touched by light. She moved with a calm that felt almost unreal, steady hands, steady breath. While the family slept just rooms away, she placed a neatly folded document on the kitchen counter, her formal notice, her final line in their story. Effective immediately, she was withdrawing her capital and reclaiming her shares. By the time the sun rose, she was already gone. Chaos hit the house like a storm. Karen called first, 10 times, 20, her voice cracking through the voicemail, accusing Auntie of abandonment, betrayal, selfishness. But Auntie didn't answer. She was sitting in a quiet conference room downtown, reviewing final documents with her lawyer, the morning light reflecting off the polished table like a fresh start. Hours later, the door crashed open. Mark barged in, red-faced and breathless, shouting accusations before he even stepped fully inside. The lawyer didn't flinch. He simply rotated the folder on the table and slid the original contracts forward. "These show her full legal rights," he said. "All of them." Mark's voice died mid-argument. His face drained of color. Karen, standing behind him, erupted. "She's ruining the family." But even she could hear the emptiness in her own words. Legal truth doesn't bend to theatrics. Auntie's voice was steady. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm taking what I earned." The shareholder meeting that afternoon felt like a courtroom. Auntie entered with her head high, her presence commanding in a way I hadn't seen in years. When she announced her withdrawal and revealed her new independent branch, a ripple moved through the room. Many staff members, people she had mentored, comforted, supported, exchanged relieved glances. A few even clapped softly, respectfully. Her absence had already changed the atmosphere. Mark tried to claw back control, bringing up every minor mistake she'd made over the years, but the board shut him down. One member spoke sharply. "Those mistakes happened because she was running the foundation you inherited." When Karen snapped, "She's always been a burden," the air cracked. Auntie didn't raise her voice. She simply turned to her, eyes clear, voice calm enough to cut. "A burden doesn't build an empire. A burden doesn't hold it together." Silence fell so thick it felt physical. Even Mark looked away. Auntie walked out with dignity, her heels echoing down the hallway while they scrambled behind her, suddenly aware of the disaster they'd created for themselves. By the end of the week, half the loyal employees filed transfer requests to her new branch. Customers followed too, people who remembered the warmth in her voice, the fairness in her dealings. Their revenue dipped sharply. Panic set in. Meanwhile, Auntie's new branch lit up with life, calls pouring in, support flowing, doors opening. Karen made one last attempt, calling her late at night with a soft, tear-filled plea. Auntie glanced at the screen, listened to it ring, then pressed ignore. For the first time in her life, she chose herself. Her revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was devastating because it was built on truth, on justice, on everything they never thought she had the strength to reclaim. Auntie settled into her new apartment like someone finally breathing after years underwater. She filled the rooms with soft colors, warm lamps, and sunlight that spilled across the floors like a quiet blessing. The space felt gentle, unlike the house she left behind. When I helped her install the small plaque on her home office door, her name etched clean and bold, she touched the metal with trembling fingers. It wasn't just a door. It was a declaration. The opening day of her new business arrived with a surprise neither of us expected. A line of loyal customers stretched across the sidewalk, people she had treated with kindness for years, now waiting for her. Not the company, not the family, her. She greeted each one with a joy that came from deep inside, the kind she had spent decades suppressing. Meanwhile, rumors traveled fast. Mark and Karen were struggling to keep their operation afloat. The financial reports showed it clearly. Massive losses once her staff and customers shifted their loyalty. The once bustling office was now half empty, the hollow rooms echoing the cost of their arrogance. Auntie never mocked them. She simply smiled softly when she heard the updates, as if releasing the last knot inside her chest. Peace looked good on her. She poured herself into mentoring her new employees, guiding them the way she had always done, except this time without being overshadowed or dismissed. Her confidence bloomed day after day. She started going out with friends again, laughing in a way I had almost forgotten she could. She cooked in her own kitchen at night, humming to herself, free from criticism and judgment. The community noticed. Her courage, her restart, became something people talked about. She was no longer the quiet helper behind the scenes. She was a respected figure in the local business world, someone others wanted to learn from. I watched her reclaim parts of herself that had been buried under years of quiet hurt. Her apartment, once small and unfamiliar, now felt vibrant, alive with plants, photos, and the sound of her footsteps moving freely. One evening, while we drank tea on her balcony, she told me she sleeps without fear now, that she never understood how heavy the burden was until the moment she set it down. As I looked at her, lighter, brighter, restored, I realized something profound. I learned what freedom truly looks like by watching her rise. I stand in the doorway of her new office at sunset, the last streaks of gold brushing across her desk as she reviews files with a steady, unshaken confidence. The soft rustle of papers feels worlds away from the night they called her a burden. I can still see the way she shrank under their words, the way her shoulders folded in as if trying to protect a heart already bruised. But now she sits with her spine straight, her gaze clear, the quiet strength she rebuilt illuminating the room more than the fading sunlight ever could. Family betrayal cuts the deepest. It slices through trust, through history, through every memory shared. It's the kind of wound you don't see until it's already bled you dry. But watching her, I've learned something else too. Choosing yourself, even once, can become the first step toward healing the years you thought were lost. I remember her whisper the night she left. Soft, trembling, but full of truth. Maybe I deserve better. She didn't just move out that night. She moved forward. Her revenge wasn't forged in anger. It was forged in success, in rebuilding, in rising. Her story taught me that silence doesn't mean defeat. Sometimes it's just the inhale before the rise, the calm before a transformation no one saw coming. I turn toward the camera, the golden light behind me fading into a warm glow, and speak to everyone watching. Ciao, if you've ever been underestimated, let it fuel you. If someone has tried to dim your light, remember it's yours to reignite. Self-worth isn't something others hand you, it's something you reclaim. I ask them to think about the people in their lives who might be weighing them down, the voices that make them smaller, the rooms that no longer deserve their presence. Take your power back, I say quietly, even if the first step is taken alone. The final message settles like truth in the air. They called her a burden, but she walked away carrying everything that mattered. I exhale slowly, letting the journey wrap itself around the moment. And as I invite viewers to subscribe if they believe in stories of quiet strength and unstoppable resilience, the screen begins to fade just as Auntie's laughter drifts from the next room, light and free, unburdened,